What we'll be covering in this video is how to leverage using the float rule in order to have easy layouts when you have text as well as a complementary image. Rather than writing it directly in the code here, what we're going to be using today is the DOM component of Dreamweaver. It's a useful way to apply tags and classes without having to really write anything, and it's an easy way to also keep track of the hierarchy within your website. So you can see we have the h1 tag that remains from the previous video and some of the content that we put in previous ones as well. What we're going to do is remove this content because we don't need it anymore. So we can just delete that out. And what we're going to do is move over to this DOM component right here. So you can see we are highlighted on the h1 in the article. And what we want to do is add a tag below it. What we're going to use is the paragraph tag to enclose the text. So to do that, all we have to do is press the plus icon. And this is quite literal. Do we want to put it above the h1 tag? Do we want to put it after, or do we want to put it inside? You can also wrap that, which means you would put a tag over top of the h1 tag. But for now, what we want to do is just put one after. And then you can see we have created another tag below the h1. So by default it will recommend div because div is again one of the most common tags used in web design. But for our needs today, we're going to use a p tag. And then you can see this box right here. That's where you can apply a class. So we're going to call this article content. Just press enter. And then you can see we have class, article content. This is content for the layout p tag. So just to give a little bit of size so we can see some text, let's copy the text inside of the p tag right here. And then just let's paste it a few times. That way it kind of looks more like finished content. And then we're going to go back to the DOM and we're going to press the plus icon again. And what we want to do is we want to actually insert a child. So we want to put a tag inside of the paragraph tag. And for this one, we are going to be using a div. And although image tags exist, there is usefulness in using a div tag sometimes for an image because you can define specific heights and widths without distorting the image. So we will go ahead and call this article image. Enter. And now you can see we have inside of the article content the text as well as the div that we're going to use for a picture. Now although it's above the content, the float rule doesn't really matter in terms of layout for what we're going to be doing, so we don't need to worry about that for today. We're just going to go ahead and remove the text out of this div though, because we won't need it there. Now what we're going to do is apply some CSS to the div with the class article image. Now just to keep good housekeeping of things, it's sometimes easier to put grouped rules in close proximity to each other. So I'm just going to go underneath the article tag, and underneath that tag let's create the class article image and then curly brackets. What we're going to apply first is a width, so we can apply, let's do 200 pixels, and then let's do the same for height. And just so we can see it, why don't we go ahead and add a border, and let's make it the same as what we have for the article tags. So solid, 1 pixel, hashtag A7, A7, A7. Just so you know as well, if you didn't want to type it in, you could also just do Control C and you could paste it in. But just again to get more familiar with coding, it's sometimes nice to do that repetition. Let's go ahead and save. We just have to go back and forth a few times because Dreamweaver is finicky with this preview. And now you can see we have the div tag above the content. Now that's not how we want it to look because you don't see many pages with images that are complementary to the text like that. So this is where we're going to be able to leverage the float rule. So let's go ahead and press semicolon after our last article image rule. And although we were not going to put an image in here for this video, we're at least going to get that layout set up for the way we want. So there's nothing secret here, it's just apply float. If we do right, save, the image is to the right, or at least our placeholder for now. If we do float left, it's to the left. So the thing we need to modify here, though, is you can see that the text is far too close to the image. So we can do some simple margin rule for that. So if we do margin, let's do 20 pixels, for example. Now we have a little bit of space. And if we wanted, for example, to apply margin 20 pixels to all of them, except, for example, the margin top, what we can do is just apply a separate margin top rule. We can just do 0 pixels. And there's multiple ways you can do this. We could have just defined it in margin, but since we'll be just jumping into this freshly, this is probably the easiest for you to get familiar with that. And now you can see we have our image, some nice spacing, and we can toggle between float left as well as float right. And this will be very useful when creating multiple page layouts or article layouts that you can toggle between this. And what we're going to do lastly is, you can see actually we have quite a bit of closeness between the text and your article here as well. So we can do this. Now rather than using margin, because that's outward spacing, we're going to use inward spacing in the article tag, which is padding 20 pixels. Now if we choose to preview this, we save. If we look in the live preview now, we can see that we have our image here, text, some nice spacing, and just an overall easy way of creating layouts.